I'm really delighted to welcome Mitch Thomashow back to campus. He is a personal mentor and former teacher and former department chair here, co-founder of the Antioch University ES Department doctoral program. In his wider life and efforts, he's currently working for Second Nature as the Presidential Fellows Program Director, where he does a lot of work with the, I always get this wrong, but I think it's the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. So having most recently been president of Unity College, where he went from Antioch, he is now a sort of mentor to college presidents on sustainability. He is author of several books that have been very prominent in the curriculum here: Ecological Identity and Bringing the Biosphere Home, and has a forthcoming book that will be out later this month, The 9 Elements of Sustainability, of the Sustainable Campus, which he'll be speaking about today. Mitch is just an amazing thinker. He's a creative teacher. In addition to I think what he brings us academically, I think things that influence the way that he acts and thinks in the world are his interest in games. If you've ever seen his collection, I don't think I've ever played a game with you, but it speaks of a certain kind of mind that can think both about details and about the big picture and the strategy and the end goal. He's also a musician, and I find that in his teaching he brings a certain kind of improvisation and creativity to it that really speaks to somebody who knows the matter and the process well enough to be able to go with the moment and the instincts. And he's developed wonderful courses here that are reflected in his writing and reflected in the excellent work of so many of our graduates. So I'm honored to be able to welcome you back, Mitch. I look forward to your talk today.
Thanks. Thanks, Joy, for the great introduction. How many of you are, well, we have the Franklin Pierce people, right? And how many master students in the ES program here? So, all right. And how many PhDs? All right, good. How many are just starting out, like first year PhDs? Just curious. Second year? Third year? Fourth? 10th? 20th? No, I'm just kidding. We have a board member here, which is wonderful. It's and community members, just people who just are, all right, excellent. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. Those of you who are currently Antioch students, I just want to say this to you. You're in the right place. This is a tremendous program. I want to tell you that you have an outstanding network of graduates around the country who are doing phenomenal work. You know, if you took all those graduates and you added up the impact that they've had on this field, you would be so, so proud as I am. So you need to know that there's amazing people out there doing really, really great things. And thanks to the Antioch faculty who are here, please raise your hands, who just, you know, yeah. It's been, you know, they've worked under all kinds of circumstances through the years, believe me. And they just do a phenomenal job. All right, now, I haven't done this talk in a while, but you know, I'm getting launched to do a bunch of them because I got a book coming out. I was really and by the, oh, Marilyn, thanks so much for getting this thing set up, which is really great. Steve, you're here, that's great. Thank you so much for coming. And I really wanted this to be the launch of the book. I wanted to have books ready and books for sale, and I wanted to come home to get it going. I did that for my first book, and it didn't happen. The book's not coming out till February 28th, but you're still going to be the first folks to, you know, be part of what, you know, is getting this book out there. The 9 elements. Why 9? Ask Alicia Maltz. It's a little inside joke, actually. It turned out that when I was here at Antioch, whenever I'd think of something, there would always be 9. And she'd always say to me, "Hey, Mitch, what's with 9?" And I'd say, "I don't know." But 333, I can remember it. I can remember 3-3. So it always turns out to be a good number. And when I came up with it, here, where did this talk even come from? At some point, I'm going to get to this talk. I don't know when, but just bear with me. When I was president of Unity College from 2006 to 2011. And when I got to Unity, it needed a lot of work. I'll put it that way. And one of the things that I wanted to do when I was president there is use sustainability as the brand as the basis of the turnaround of the college. I wanted to show that you didn't need a lot of money to make it happen, because Unity was close to Antioch in terms of not having a lot of money. I mean, but maybe even worse. We had a $3 million endowment, virtually no philanthropy whatsoever, major infrastructure issues, huge turnaround challenge. The Unity College, like so many colleges, are 3 or 4 catastrophic admission cycles away from the end. It's really true. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it really became clear to me that sustainability could be the basis of the turnaround. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to get out and talk about the college, because not a lot of people knew about it. And so I needed some way to talk about what it was we were doing, and this all emerged and evolved over time. Since that time, 2006 to 2011, I've been around the country a lot. I've probably visited 25 or 30 different institutions, from big R1 universities to community colleges in Nebraska where you give talks on television to 10 campuses, to little small colleges in Kentucky. And one of the things that's been incredible about this is to see the emphasis on sustainability at all these campuses. So I want to report back to you on some of what I found and wrap it into this whole notion of the 9 elements. Now, I've got to put my glasses on so I can see what's up and what's down. And down is up, or so they tell me. When I was at Unity, I always wanted to remind people, in fact, wherever I give a talk anywhere, like here, why we do this. Sustainability, in my view, is a response to a planetary emergency. And it's important that we keep that front and center. I define the planetary emergency as 4 biosphere trends. The 6th mega extinction, that is the big one. We are in the early stages of the 6th mega extinction. As you know, there have been 5 mega extinctions during the history of life on Earth, which is a time when between 60 and 80% of all the species on Earth perish. We are well into number 6 right now. That is the huge challenge that we all face. Plunging declines in biodiversity, what I describe as rapidly changing climatic and oceanic circulations, I think is the best way to put it, and biogeochemical imbalances. This is it. This is the question that we're all dealing with. Sustainability is a response to these issues. These are the single most important challenges that we face in our lifetime. In my view, well, the consensus of international peer-reviewed science is clear, and it becomes more clear every day. The better the data is, the more sophisticated the research becomes, and the proliferation of accurate research data over the last several decades is extraordinary, actually. The more it becomes clear that this is a very important question. This tells you a little bit about where I come from and what I think is important. In the late 1960s, before there was an internet, I was at New York University in the Bronx before they sold that campus and moved everything downtown. And one of my favorite things to do was to get on the subway, go to the first car, because you had kind of a light show. I'll say no more than that. It was 1969. And we'd go downtown, and I used to love to go to the 8th Street bookstore, which was an independent bookstore. It no longer exists. There was no internet in those days. It was 1969, so many things were happening. There was the women's movement, the civil rights movement, all the issues around the Vietnam War, and the environmental movement. So every week there were more amazing new books on the shelves that I really wanted to look at. That was the way I, learned about what was happening. And one day I saw this book on the cover. Had a big picture of the Earth on it. It's the whole Earth, and to use the parlance of the time, I said, wow, what's that? I took the book off the shelf and opened it up, and it was like one of those things to do books that you used to have as a kid. And were a really strange layout. Now you see layouts like this all over the place, but on the internet especially. But Every page had 11 or 12 different pictures of things, and it was fascinating. There was a poem by Gary Snyder running along the bottom of it. I looked at this and said, this is amazing. I went back to my room, I studied it, and I realized in retrospect that this was really the origins of sustainability in large measure. I mean, we can go further back and look at Thoreau and voluntary simplicity and all those things, but really for this era, for this post-1950 era, I was born in 1950, so that's all I know, this is the origins of sustainability. And by the way, there's a new book out by Kevin Kelly called Cool Tools. They're trying to keep the love going, I guess. And so in retrospect, when I think about my career, I've been trying to recreate this wherever I've been. And, being a college president was a chance to say, can we live by, if you look at the older Whole Earth catalog and some of the sections, you see sections on natural history, land use, communication, education. It was extremely visionary. So that's behind what I'm trying to do. And I like to remind audiences all the time that we're not even at the 9 elements yet, but we'll get there. That a sustainable approach to economic decisions encourages frugality, debt reduction, living within our means, protecting future generations, conserving natural resources, and creative problem solving. It's not a right-wing or left-wing thing. There is widespread agreement in communities all over the place about the necessity of these ways of thinking, of these habits of mind. So as a former college president, I suggest that sustainability is the single biggest challenge for all of education, and it's ultimately linked to our turbulent economy, the accessibility and affordability of schooling, and how we think about the future of the planet. I want to say a little bit more about the accessibility and affordability of schooling, because it really matters enormously, and it is the single big issue in higher education right now. You've got about 200 colleges, elite colleges, that cost anywhere from $50,000 to $65,000 a year, that have endowments that are hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billion. And these are all colleges are just doing fine. We don't have to worry about them. Sometimes they say they're not, but they are. They're doing fine. These are the private colleges. Then there's everybody else, which includes Unity, which includes Antioch. And everybody else is on the margins. They mostly rely on your tuition dollar. They struggle to gain philanthropy in an increasingly competitive environment, and it's very difficult to make ends meet, believe me. The average profit on a Unity student we figured out was something like $90. It's probably the same here. It's very, very difficult to make it work. And this is what it's like for most colleges and universities. So and by the way, in the public realm, it's similar. You've got the R1s, the research ones, that they're at the whim of state legislatures, but they are the ones that pretty much are very well funded. And then there are the state colleges, which are really struggling, in the community colleges. So higher education's in crisis, and one of the reasons why so many presidents around the country have been interested in sustainability is because it provides us with a chance to finance energy efficiency and to really economize in ways that make a lot of sense for the entire community. So when we do sustainability, it's important that everyone understands that obviously the planetary emergency matters enormously, and for me that's the main priority, but also we need to demonstrate how we can run frugal institutions. How can we can run institutions in a way that reflect what the entire community really needs to do. So this is a very big question, and it's interesting too, by the way, that the community colleges are at the forefront of sustainability, and maybe I'll say more about that later. Okay. A little bit more about my work, then I'm going to get to the 9 elements. Those are all college presidents. I'm in there somewhere. These are among the original signatories of the ACUPCC. The ACUPCC is the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. There are almost 700 signatories, representing about a third of the student population in the United States. What it means is that your institution pledges itself to carbon neutrality over a specified period of time. Franklin Pierce is a signatory. Antioch University is a signatory. And it's an important movement. And I work with the steering committee of the ACUPCC. In fact, we have a meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock, which I'll need an office for somebody, where we're planning the summit. We're planning next year's summit. We're trying to get at least 200 college presidents together. And the reason why is because if you can get your college president behind all of these things, then you can maximize the effectiveness of the leadership, not only on campus, but in the entire community. So we work, there are some presidents that have done the most famous of which is Michael Crow at Arizona State University, who has single-handedly transformed that whole system. But there are many, many, many others who have made a difference. I work with these people because it's, first of all, it's a lot of fun. And second of all, there's so much that they can offer and there's so much they can contribute. That's what I do. What's really interesting to me is since I've been doing this for a long time now, going back to the late 60s, since I was a college president in 2006, there's been an amazing proliferation of sustainability organizations. In fact, I haven't really seen anything like this since the late 60s, to tell you the truth. And sustainability, for better or for worse, sometimes for worse, has now trumped environmental studies in terms of numbers of new programs, numbers of students studying it. And what's happened that's very interesting to me is environmental studies historically has always been, well, a certain kind of person. I'll leave that to your imagination to stereotype. Sustainability has broadened this to include multiple constituencies. So we have business schools now that are getting involved in this. If you go to a college campus and you look for the sustainability office, it could be anywhere. It could be at student life, it could be with the provost, it could be with the president, it could come out of facilities. It's really interesting to me that sustainability as a way of thinking about human-nature relationships now shows up in so many different places in American higher education. That's a really good thing. So if you look at the ASHE newsletter, and if you follow this field, you'll see that there are dozens of new positions as sustainability coordinators, which, by the way, are now a very important position in the private sector as well. Lots of big and small businesses have sustainability coordinators. So we've seen the biggest growth in terms of the working force for environmental studies sustainability in the field of sustainability. We've seen the biggest growth of new programs. We've seen the biggest growth of organizations. But what's happened now is they've all plateaued, because most of the early adopters have come into it. So there's a whole question of what's the next push that is necessary, and that's one of the things that we're going to do at the summit. Okay, so finally the 9 elements. Well, I'm not going to bother with this one. There are 3 broad categories: infrastructure, community, and learning. And again, how did I get to 9? I mean, there could be 12, there could be 5. 9 Alicia, it just felt right. So I'm going to tell you what they all are, and I'm going to go over them each of them individually, and that's it. That's what I'm going to do. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. I had a slideshow, and I did it by myself, and I know about 2 commands in making slideshows. So I gave this talk at Alfred State University one time, and someone was in the audience and said, "Wow, you could do a lot better than that." So she just took the show and redid it for me. Wow, that's awesome. So I mean, I don't know how to make that colors and flip it in a new color. Oh man. All right. So here's the whole map, the matrix, if you will. And it's, the thing that I need to get across to you is, because I am so primitive with my PowerPoint skills, there's no way I could turn this into a multi-dimensional, interactive, Boolean set of variables. Sounded pretty cool, huh? And so instead, I put them in boxes. But the point I want to make, and what my book stresses at great length, is that we want to bring a whole campus together. And we want to show that people who are involved in energy have something to say about curriculum. And people who are doing art have something to say about food. And people who are doing investment have something to say. I mean, it's all connected. And especially if you're in a big system, it's so easy to be marginalized in a particular department and think that, well, I'm just saving energy here by retrofitting this building. But my view is that, no, we're all working on this together. We're all doing it simultaneously. We're all learning from each other. And that's one of the single take-home messages I want to present to you with these slides. So we're going to go over all of these categories very soon. And there we go. All right. So we're going to start with energy. This is the house we built at Unity College. When we got to Unity, energy very basically is the ability to do work. It's the transformation of matter to produce heat and electricity. Fundamental concept. And the point of sustainable energy is to maximize the efficiency of the process and minimize unwanted byproducts. So we need energy algorithms that enable us to do all those things without simultaneously altering the biosphere. That's the big challenge in front of us. At Unity, we built the Unity House, which is on the bottom left. We got there and there was no presidential residence. So we worked with Ted Benson, who lives up the road here and has his wonderful Benson Wood homes. And basically, Ted came to campus. He's a good friend of mine from playing basketball right here in Keene, Saturday mornings. He doesn't play anymore. I still do, which is kind of stupid, but I do. It's stupid because I'm old, you know. But I have a lot of fun doing it. At any rate, Ted came to campus, and I said, what do you see? What should I do? And he walked out, he left, and I was really depressed. Because if I did everything he said, it would have cost $100 million, and you know, I had no money. So then he came back a few weeks later and said, well, we want to build a prototype house for you at cost. So I thought, okay, that sounds like a good idea. And we did. We built the first LEED Platinum President's Residence in the country. And here's how we did it. You get a housing allowance. We did, at least I did at Unity. I got a housing allowance. And it wasn't a big one, but it was a housing allowance. Ostensibly, you don't need much to live in Unity, Maine. It's true. It's really true, but I won't go there now. So what I talked the board into, the board loved the idea, by the way, is that we will use the housing allowance as the monthly payment for this. And the college will take some money out of its planned fund. Of course, these things always cost more than you think. But we wanted to build a house that was modest in price because what it turned, I think that when I'll tell you another little story and then I'll get to the main point. When I was selected for the Unity position, I thought, oh my God, what the heck? I don't know anything about being a college president. So I went and spoke to Walt Peterson, the late, great Walt Peterson at Franklin Pierce. Said, Walt, you know, what am I going to do? And I went to see Helen Giles G., who was the president at the time of Keene State. Hey, and they were great. They were really, really wonderful people. Anyway, Helen said to me something that has stuck with me to this day, and I'm sure, Steve, that you can relate to this. Being a college president is the best chance you will ever have to be an educator. And that made me feel a sense of great relief because I realized, yes, that is in fact the case because there are so many opportunities that you have to explore learning when you are the executive. So Cindy, who's here, and I thought that by living this way, we're going to send a great message out to the entire community and to every single person who visits Unity College. And it worked. I'm going to say a little bit more about these things later. In fact, when I did it for the first time, people said, I mean, there were so many doubters, as they say. What are you building a house for yourself for? You know, we need a lab. Well, where am I going to host donors? You know? I mean, there's no place to do it. And how are you going to recruit your next president? And we're going to get so much national attention for this. So just bear with me. But there were a lot of doubters, not on the board, among the faculty, who, you know, but that's a whole other story. I only say that in the sense that at Unity, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, the big challenge for me as president was to help the college gain confidence in itself. Now, we built this, and this helps a college have confidence in itself. We had gubernatorial debates on campus, and we'd bring all the people up here. The only person who didn't come was the guy who finally won, by the way, the Tea Party guy, LePage. But everyone else came. And it was really great. So then we've raised $500,000 to build that for students. And now they're raising more money, and they're raising more money, and they're raising more money. They got a $10 million gift 2 weeks after I left. They were so happy to see me go. And they got, you know, but the philanthropy has really, really begun to come into Unity now. And I'm absolutely convinced it's because of what we did in terms of sustainability. So, at any rate, we're still with energy here. And the point that I want to make is that, did I skip over one by mistake? I don't know. I guess not. Energy structures are institutional landmarks. So if you go to Arizona State University and go to the football field, you'll see solar panels. If you go to University of Minnesota, Morris, you'll see windmills. This is David Orr's joint at Oberlin. This is a wood chip storage facility at Unity College, and this is geothermal at an institution in British Columbia. So that's part of the whole learning experience. I think it's so important that every institution demonstrates what it does in a way that's entirely visible, and that energy structures are institutional landmarks. I mean, if you fly over, King Coal country, it makes a statement, right? So I love it when I go to a campus and I see this kind of thing. So energy, look, there's a whole 35, 40-page chapter on energy. There's so much to say about it, and you'll just have to read the book. I'm just going through this very quickly and showing you some of the highlights and telling hopefully entertaining stories in the process. But each of these essays, what I tried to do in writing the book is the same thing I did with my earlier books. There's so many books on sustainability, but I wanted to write one that you'll be able to open up in 20 years and still find interesting. So it's kind of philosophical and it's historical and it covers quite a range of ideas because it's so trendy too, so I wanted to avoid all of that. People will see whether that in fact is what happened. Food is, of course, literally, no pun intended, the lowest hanging fruit. It is the single most inexpensive way to transform a campus. You've done some of it here. We did a lot of this at Unity College. We started to grow food absolutely everywhere, and not in the back 40 like some institutions do. We grew food right in front of all the major office buildings, and it was wonderful, actually. It was absolutely wonderful. The parents loved it. The students loved it. It showed that we were an active campus, and they made the campus much more beautiful as a result. So we also grew wildflower gardens everywhere. A student came to me and said, can we have wildflower gardens? I said, absolutely, work with facilities, put them up all over campus. When I got to Unity, it was nothing but big lawns, and all summer long, the facilities people would drive their lawnmowers around. Oh, that's not very good. That's wasteful, but it looked like a lot of fun. That's all they do. All summer long, they drive in circles around the facilities. So those days are over. Those days are over. We are planting food instead. So that easy things to do. Lots of campuses can do this sort of thing, and I encourage it for not only because it makes the place much more agreeable and interesting, but it's just the right way to move forward. And it gets everyone involved. It's intergenerational. It brings the community in. So I'm a big advocate of food. I tell a little story in the book. In fact, each chapter in the book starts with some little story about Unity, and then I get into the bigger picture. There was a day at Unity, I don't know if you've read Michael Pollan's wonderful book. It was The Omnivore's Dilemma. There was one day at Unity when, for a whole bunch of variety of reasons, I wound up experiencing each of the 4 meals in that book. We had a wild foods game dinner because there's a very active hunting tradition at Unity College. You're allowed to actually even have a gun on campus. It has to be locked up and registered and all that. But it's a very interesting campus that way because we have the first generation conservative students who were wonderful and loved the outdoors, and we had the more progressive dreadlocks. So the campus wasn't your typical kind of precious green campus, but we had all kinds of students, and I think it was very exciting actually. And I learned a lot from all of that. So anyway, we had all the meals in one day because the cafeteria was serving the industrial meal. We changed all that over time, but we really tried to make food a very important part of what we did. All campuses ought to be doing this. In fact, we would start catering all events with local food. And when the president's doing that, you just set a message that every single event is going to be local, it's going to be organic, it's going to be healthy. And the interesting thing is we had folks in town who had no training. A woman who basically ran the local pizza parlor was so interested in this that we said to her, look, we'll work with you and we'll give you the contract for do all the food, and completely transformed her life. That's what I mean about the president being the lead educator. It completely transformed her life, it transformed her family, and it made her business much more vital and viable. So those are some of the neat things that you can do with food. And of course, there are all the curricular issues that go into it as well. You can read those, and they're all very interesting and make a lot of sense. K through Gray, all of these questions. Where does food come from? Go back to the basic principles of place-based learning that you're also involved in David Sobel and bioregionalism. A better understanding of all these kinds of questions. So we're going to move on from here. The next is materials. And this is the third of infrastructure, energy, food, materials. And that essentially it's the manipulation, rearrangement, and heating and cooling of matter to produce stuff. And I used to do an activity, which the faculty will remember, where I'd hold up a magic marker. We used to do this in the doctoral program. And ask folks, tell me everything you can about the magic marker. Break them into small groups, you know about small groups, and give them newsprint, you know about that. And they try to, they didn't know. No one knows, because it's a magic marker. The point is this, is that we know so little about where things come from that we use on an everyday basis. And the point of sustainability is to make it more clear where things come from. So we tried to do that at Unity. We tried to make sure we had mainly locally sourced materials. When we built the Unity House, it all came from local, that is, northern New England materials or recycled materials. We tried to do that with procurement. I'll say more about procurement in a moment. But you can take energy, food, and materials, and there are all these curricular aspects of it as well, inviting the hard questions. Cindy, I think you wrote the original inviting the hard questions part of this. Supply chain, minimizing, you know, typically now we talk about the supply chain. In fact, Walmart talks about the supply chain. This is caught on. It's you know, we have to always be skeptical and critical, but we also have to be supportive when these businesses do the right thing. Vigilant, but supportive is the way I look at it. And it's really wonderful to see the number of corporations that are really beginning to think about questions related to supply chain. Okay, well, I'm going backwards. All right, so now we go to the middle community, which is, I think, where I have the most experience by virtue of the presidency. And governance is crucial to making this happen. And that's real. When I do my consulting, when I do a talk at most colleges and universities, I do a plenary address like this. Could be a number of people like you here, 50 to 100, or it could be several thousand. And then I insist that I meet with the president and his or her senior team in their cabinet, even if just for 15 minutes. And my strategy typically is, I usually like to do this at the end, after I've met students and I've met faculty, is I try to get a very quick assessment of the really great things that are happening on the campus and tell the senior staff about those great things, because you know all executives like to get the very best news. And then suggest as well that with a few little tweaks and a little more support, there'll be a multiplier effect and you can amplify what happens. Because at some of these bigger institutions, some of the presidents, even if they're supportive, have no idea what's going on. And they need to know, they need to understand that there's so much that is happening. So the role of organizational culture is very important. I write about this at great length. It's crucial to have alignment between mission, governance, and curriculum. All of those things go together. If your curriculum does not reflect the mission of the organization, it's not going to happen, and vice versa. We did things like we placed sustainability criteria into job descriptions and performance evaluations. I'll never forget, early on, my first couple of months at Unity, I was in a meeting, and I suggested, why don't we get really serious about this and put sustainability criteria into job descriptions and performance evaluations. And I just heard the litany of excuses. Oh, we can't do that, we can't do it, we can't do it, here's why, we can't do it. So I jokingly just got up and started to leave the room and said, well, this must be the wrong place. It says Unity American Environmental College, but clearly I've come to the wrong campus. And you know, I made the point, and then I came back and said, well, of course we can get these things done. And you'll figure out how to do it. So the Dean of Student Life, it was up to him to work with his staff to figure out what they were going to do. And over time, what they began to do is they developed lots of wellness criteria, which is really what you want to do with 18 to 21-year-olds. I mean, it's really about healthy living. So the college was transformed after several years in terms of what we started to do regarding healthy living. So every unit did it on their own. And it was a very simple way to give folks autonomy and to make big changes on campus. In fact, after several years, people would come up to me and tell me about things that were going on that I didn't even know about. This is at a small college, which is great. I mean, I'm not a control freak. My whole philosophy of leadership is to delegate and come and let's talk if you have questions and concerns and want to, work something out. But nothing would please me more when we could delegate this out and it would all happen. So over time, that's what happened. We developed guidelines for procurement events, procedures, and protocols. Every graduation, every single event had criteria for sustainability. And it took time. It took us about 3, 4, 5 years before it finally moved forward, and now they're doing great. Governance is also about the capacity to change, going backwards again, and innovate. I spend a lot of time in the book, I'm not going to spend so much time now, talking about the importance of leadership generally. And there were so many dilemmas I would face, and trying to balance boldness and tenderness, urgency and patience, innovation and tradition, and others. I write about more in the book. I didn't want to overwhelm folks with the slides. I'll give you an example. When I got to Unity, and every institution's like this, and Steve, I'm sure you're experiencing this too, there was a real need for people to be heard and listened to and feel cared for and understood. And there was a certain tenderness that was required of leadership. But I also needed to make some hard decisions fast. So it was a real tough challenge trying to balance boldness and tenderness. Urgency, and for those of you who are going to be leaders, urgency and patience was the other one. I play hoops, I'm a competitor, I like to win, I wanted to shine amongst all the other colleges. I mean, it's part of the makeup of the certain kinds of executives. Yet I also knew if I go too fast, it won't work. I have to be patient with this institution and this culture. So I try to assess how far are people able to go to move forward, and then I push them a little bit harder than that. And that was always a balancing act. If you push too fast, you can just freak people out. If you go too slow, then you're going to lose to the other institutions that are doing the innovations before you are. So, and then finally, innovation and tradition. Every campus, believe me, thinks it does things completely uniquely, especially the small ones. You guys too. I mean, it's just the way it is. I've been to Evergreen, Prescott. I've been to all of the alternative colleges. Everyone thinks it's doing things that are entirely unique. No one could possibly do it like them. Now, I don't think it's true. I think there are a lot of us that are doing similar kinds of cool things, although, there's no question in my mind, by the way, and I'll say something about Antioch in a moment in that regard to make you feel proud, I hope. But often that attitude blocks innovation, because you ride on the history of your innovation and you don't continue it. So just a thing I've noticed at various institutions I've been to. We so much here at Antioch take for granted a particular type of pedagogy that we forget that the rest of the world doesn't necessarily do it that way. And when you go to some places sometimes, you think about certain ways of learning and people say, wow, that's so neat. And you think, whoa, we've been doing that for years. And that's a very interesting thing about how we learn and teach at this place. That there's a pedagogy that's been developed for a really long time in terms of participatory learning that's really very special. Okay, so next. I turned bright mode on. What am I doing? All right. RGB mode? Custom mode? Which is the best one? Presentation mode? It's like my TV.
Energy saving.
I can never get back to the original one. Looks a little blue now. All right, never mind. Good leaders are meaning makers. You all need to be meaning makers. Every one of you wants to be a good leader. By the way, how much time do I have?
15 minutes,
I have 15 minutes?
but you don't have to use that.
Oh, I better start really flying. All right. I'm not going to get into this now. Then you have to read the book.
Leaving us in suspense.
I did that again. All right. Same thing. Governance rules of thumb. Quickly look at it. I'm not going to explain it now. Just not gonna. It'll draw me into more irrelevant stories. All right. The bottom one really matters a lot. Celebrate your accomplishments. Okay, this is an interesting one and important. We're going to stick with this a little bit. Investment, money. Every college campus, other than the top 200, even them sometimes, always thinks it lacks resources. And it does lack financial resources. But what I suggest in the book is that we have to rethink what we mean by capital. And most institutions focus exclusively on financial capital. But really, as students, what you get here, and the reason I think ultimately why you come to school, is for the social capital. It's for the peers, the cohort, it's the people you're around that represents the true wealth of this institution. Yet we don't ever describe our wealth in those terms. Every campus would assume that it has high intellectual capital, although not all do, but everyone will assume that it does. And also, campuses have lots of valuable, if you can use that term to describe, natural capital. So if you look at even this place, really, when you think about solar gain, for example, if you think about what could grow here if there wasn't pavement. I'm not saying you should tear up all the pavement and put a garden there, although it would be kind of fun. What I'm suggesting, though, is that there is a lot of natural capital on a campus that, and if you look at all of these things, suddenly you realize that any campus really has a great deal of wealth. So we have to rethink about the whole notion of investment. The other thing that's really important and is obviously crucial for Antioch, New England, and any institution, I'll say a few words about this in terms of what we did at Unity, is that every campus is an economic multiplier. If you took Antioch away from Keene, it would be a big hit to this community in terms of the number of people who are employed here, the amount of commerce that results from Antioch being here. A place like Unity, all campuses are like that. If we chose to work with a local organic farmer, we could make or break that farmer because of the contract with our college. So on the level of procurement, when you think about the local economy and what you add, there's a lot that you can do to build everyone's prospects together in an institution. So that's how I've been thinking about investment. That's how I thought about it in Unity. If you're at Arizona State and you develop a procurement contract with a certain vendor, wow, that's big business. That's big money. It really is. But even at small institutions, this matters. So there's a lot to talk about here. I think, again, that's why there's a whole chapter in a book on it, but you can look at some of those questions. Sustainable investment is a big issue right now. That's what Bill McKibben's been involved in with the whole divestment question, which college presidents, by the way, for the most part, are very lukewarm about. I love Bill; he's great, and everything else. In fact, the last story I'm going to tell you of this slideshow is a Bill McKibben story. But it's complicated stuff when you start going in that way. What I suggest to institutions and presidents is do the best you can to have the most sustainable investments possible. We know a lot more now than we did 5 years ago about how to do it. You can never be pure, but there's a lot that you can do and you can think about and make it for the presidents that feel like they really can't move towards divestment because of a whole range of political issues. What they can do is bring it to the community as an educational question. There's a lot that we can learn in terms of looking at how we invest and where we invest and why we do it, and that's very interesting. So sustainable investment's a big issue now. Financing, the big challenge, what we're doing right now with the PCC is we're trying to figure out how we can develop major mechanisms to finance energy efficiency. There's lots and lots, I don't know if you follow the business stuff at all, but there's tons of capital out there looking for places to invest. And there's so much money to be made with energy efficiency on campuses. And most campuses aren't able to do it because they don't have the capital to invest. So we're thinking a lot about how you find, on a big scale, I mean really scaling up is the question, how you scale up to do energy efficiency financing. And that, I think some really cool things are going to be happening in that regard in the next 6 to 12 months. Okay, wellness. That guy's riding a bicycle lawnmower, you can't really see that. But I cannot tell you the number of college campuses I go to where I talk to people and they tell me how burnt out they are. And I think, what's that all about? Everyone's burnt out all the time. So now, you guys, I mean, in Antioch you teach, I don't know, what do you teach, 6 courses a year now, right? It's high. Unity was 8. There are a lot of campuses where it's 3 or 4. But any place you go, people talk about how burnt out they are. And to me, that's almost always a function of poor time management, insufficient institutional attention to wellness questions. And what's worse is the 18-year-olds come in, I don't know, I'm not saying you all are 18, I don't know how old you are, but the freshmen come into campuses and they have issues. You know from yourselves or your friends, they have issues. The big challenge, going back to 15, 16, and 17-year-olds, talk to any guidance counselor in any high school in America about what they deal with on Monday morning. And it will shock you and terrify you because of unsupervised adolescence as a result of a whole range of sociological issues, which is beyond the scope of this discussion. We get them as 18-year-olds on college campuses. And if you don't think it has an impact on learning, this is a huge question. So, to me, sustainability has to focus on wellness. We know so much more about emotional and social intelligence, the management of behavior, the physiology of some of these kinds of questions, and we don't teach it. We don't teach it. Very few students come to college when they're 18 and learn this kind of thing. And we can make a huge, huge difference if we were to. So to me, this is a very important neglected part of the sustainability conversation. I'm going to get off my high horse now, but wellness is huge. And what we did at Unity, I'd take noontime bike rides with the senior staff. We brought in massage people. We did everything. We just had constant folks coming to campus. It's, out in the middle of nowhere, tons of outdoor things. At Unity, what was real interesting, once we focused on this, and sustainability, by the way, our retention is the number of students who remain from year 1 to year 2. If it was 60 when I got there, it went into the low 80s when I left. That's huge, 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 because it means students are staying, it means they're more likely to graduate, and by the way, it means you're keeping the income. Not insignificant. And also, you get, as president of a small college, you get these behavior reports, incident reports they're called, of all the bad things that happen. Right? Our incident reports went like this once we started focusing on wellness and all that goes with it. So it was really important, and I'd love to see more and more institutions doing this kind of thing. But we're going to move on because time's running out. Curriculum, essentially what you know and how you think is always a fraction of how you live. I mean, I really come from the learning by doing school. And you can go to a campus and you can take any course you want, but if the campus does not actually reflect the habits of mind and habits of behavior, it's not going to be nearly as effective. So it's got to be out of the head and into the body and into the real days and habits of everything. Now, it's a little bit different in graduate campuses, but still this matters for places like here too. But in undergraduate institutions, you've got 18 to 21-year-olds, again, you Pierce people, and many of you away from home for the first time. You got all kinds of identity issues to be tackling and thinking about. You're going to be coming up with the habits of how you're going to live for the rest of your life. If you go to a campus that is really doing great things with sustainability, you're going to learn that stuff, and you're going to have habits that you will keep for the rest of your life. Now, we don't have any long-term research that bears this out, so I may not be right, but I think I am. All right, we can go on and on curriculum, the whole chapter on it. The thing at Unity that was so funny, when I got there, there were about 30 faculty and about 30 majors, which to me represented the ultimate balkanization of the faculty. Well, I'll just have my own major. Okay, great. So you'd look at the catalog, and I'm from this field I couldn't even distinguish. Please explain to me the difference between environmental science and environmental systems analysis. I couldn't figure it out. So here's what I did. This happens to be my field. I know a lot about it, but I figured if I get involved with the curriculum, they won't like it because faculty don't like that. So I said, okay, you've got 2 years to completely overhaul this thing. I want no more than a dozen majors. You can organize them into about 4 or 5 centers. I have an idea about what they ought to be, but you decide. 2 years, the VP for Academic Affairs is going to supervise it, then come back to me and I'll get your money for it. And that's what we did. And we wound up having a much better curriculum. It wasn't exactly what I would have done, but it's not my college. My job was to make sure that the voice of the faculty was heard, but also some limits were set to what needed to get done, and it made a very big difference. The new president is still moving that whole process forward, actually. Okay, so we're almost done here. Art, aesthetics, huge, very important. Antioch's always been good at that. You go to the halls, they're always decorated and all that. At Unity, we ran a conference called the Art of Sustainability. We brought scientists and sustainability coordinators and artists together. And we basically said, if you had free reign to do whatever you'd want to do on this campus, what would it do? That was Cindy's doing. And it was amazing. So we had 1.5 art faculty members, a small college. So one guy, this guy, Ben Potter, said, Ben, you have free license. You can do whatever you want on this campus. Anything you want. Just one rule, check with facilities because I can't have you breaking anything. So surprise me. I want public art everywhere. I want your friends. I want the students. And it was amazing how we transformed the campus. This is, again, a campus that didn't have much money. It was absolutely pedestrian. It was not a beautiful campus, although, the setting was lovely. And within 6 months, it was funky as can be. We had sculptures and things on walls. It was just wonderful. It gave people the freedom to explore and experiment. Didn't cost me a dime. And it gave lots of local community artists a venue for getting their work done. So, again, when presidents of wealthy institutions, I was sitting on, I won't say the college, one of the 3 elite colleges in Maine, which they are, and I was sitting next to a president. He said, I don't have enough money to do this. I was looking, oh yeah, what's your endowment, $500 million or something? You don't have enough money to get this stuff? Come on. So for me, it built up that side of me that wants to prove that you can get it done. It's just a matter of will and intention and leadership and priority, essentially. All right, so here's the last one. Art matters, aesthetics, all these slides about it. Interpretation. I cannot tell you the number of LEED buildings I've been in where you wouldn't even know they're LEED. Now, this is the perfect place for it. You do this pretty well here. You could do it better. Every institution can. Signage everywhere about every sustainability initiative, and here's why. I figured at Unity College, and this is remote, rural Maine, we had tens of thousands of visitors every year. People just driving through, parents, hopefully potential donors, vendors, you name it. Bigger schools have even more. The way I see it, every single person who visits campus is a student. I don't care whether you're matriculated or you're just coming by for an hour. Colleges and universities, despite all the issues around accountability and all being a target for this thing and that thing, are still held in very high esteem in most communities, and they are the longest lasting institutions in many communities. So they matter a lot. And everyone who visits gets an education of some kind. So that's why interpretation is so powerfully important. Now, I think the students and everyone has to have a role in that. So I'll tell you a final little story about interpretation. This was the cafeteria at Unity College. During Halloween, you'd often find a pumpkin on top of this cupola. These are the Jimmy Carter solar panels. When Jimmy Carter was president, he had solar panels on the White House. When Reagan came, he took them down. Some enterprising person back at Unity, who wasn't raising money because no one did, said, why don't we get the solar panels and put them up here? It was very cool, actually. It was one of the great moments in the history of the college. It turns out that Glenn Close, the actress, lived there, and they got some money from her. So they got the panels, and for years they sat there, not really working, although they can work. Well, for years, the solar panels were sitting there. By the way, every college president, I don't know if you agree with this or not, Steve, inherits something really good that no one told him or her about, and something really bad that no one told him or her about. The really good thing I got was the Jimmy Carter solar panels, because it was 2006, and everybody wanted one. Everybody wanted one. So the first people who wanted one were these filmmakers, these Swiss filmmakers who did a film called The Road Not Taken, which essentially was about the Jimmy Carter solar panels, and they wanted to take one of the solar panels and bring it down to the Jimmy Carter Museum in Georgia. Google wanted one for the inauguration. Huang Ming, a solar energy baron in China, wanted one from his solar energy museum, so he came to Maine to get one and invited Cindy and I to go to China, and we went to his museum, right, to demonstrate one of the Jimmy Carter solar panels. So this was an amazing asset for us. But the best story of all was McKibben, who's a good friend, gave me a call. This is before the pipeline thing. And he had an event, and there's a point here, and it's not just an entertaining story, I hope. I hope there's a point, and I hope it's entertaining. McKibben was doing something called Put Solar On It. This preceded his Keystone stuff. And the idea was he wanted to get every head of state around the world to use solar energy at their residence. So the idea was that they would go to the White House and they would urge Obama to put solar panels back on the White House. So I said, of course, you can have one of these solar panels. That's a great idea. The only caveat is come to the Unity House first, because that's the house we showed you before. There's a nice kind of symmetry between us as a environmental college with a solar house and the solar panels. And you're going to take 4 of our very best students with you and our sustainability coordinator, and why don't you go down in a grease-powered vehicle? So this is interpretation. For me, it was like, wow, we have a great chance to tell our story. And we have a chance not only to tell our story, but we have a chance to tell the story of sustainability and everything that we believe in. And Bill's going to help us. So interpretation is not just signage. It's how you think about messaging. It's how you think about all the people who come in contact with your school and how they can learn. And not so that you're going to indoctrinate them or anything, but you can raise questions. That's the whole point of the solar panels. So anyway, we got 4 of our students together. It turns out they were all women. And they had an amazing experience. And they wound up going, and one of them wound up, but they all cleaned up very nicely. It's pretty scruffy up there. And they all cleaned up really well. One wound up on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. They put some makeup. It was like, whoa! And she was a natural. And she actually wound up getting hired by McKibben as his personal assistant, which was great. And they actually got to the Obama White House. And the experience so this is, again, getting the whole campus, getting the students, getting everyone involved in what you're doing. And Jean Altobel. Yes, is that right? No, Altamari. It was Jan Altobel, was an Antioch student. All right, Jean Altamari. They were devastated because they thought they had such high hopes, and they felt that they were just dealt with like they were children, and they were working with these bureaucrats and just being told that, well, we can't do it, and here's why. So it was and that had to be debriefed. That had to be debriefed. What's the point of activism? Are you going to stick with activism? I remember Jean said, no, I'm just going to be a naturalist now. And then a year later, she decided, no, I'm going to go and work with McKibben. So there's so many interesting stories, and that's what education is. Antioch knows that, and it's really exciting. So anyway, this is the story, and the stories matter. And I say that everyone who's doing this work needs to be telling their stories. That's what you need to do. If you're going to have a successful career, you're going to need to learn what your voice is, how you tell your story, whether you're a PhD student trying to figure out what your dissertation is, or a master's student trying to figure out who you are, what you are, or an undergraduate. You need to understand what matters in your work and how you describe that to other people as effectively as you possibly can, and then you're making progress. So the point of this book was to tell my story. There's the cover for the book. And it's your turn to tell yours and share it with everyone else. So thank you. I'm done. All right.